Hello, everybody. So, as I mentioned in the previous video, this theory is sort of complicated. It had to try to adapt this whole host of music that had tons of variety in it, and some of those pieces fit well with the new theory. Other ones didn't. So we're going to first look at a chant that does not actually fit very well with the new theory. And let's go over there. So, where are you? Nope. Sorry, folks. Hang on. There we go. So this is an introit, which again, you'll be reading about this chapter. And we're basically going to look from the beginning, this part here, to here. And if we look, so C is, if we look at the last note, we can see from the clef that C is the top line. So we got A, and then F, and then it ends here, ends on E. So think for a second about the stuff you just watched in the videos and see if you can figure out what mode it's gonna be. You can get at least half the answer. Pause the video till you figure it out. Okay, it's some sort of Phrygian, right? Because that's the mode that starts on E. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the range and see how high above and how low below we go. So, looking here, it actually starts on D, so that's already below E. Let's see if we find anything lower. Here's another D. Looking through D, 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 D. Okay, we got some C's below, right? And kind of continuing through, looks like C is the lowest note we get. Now, if we look above the E, well, let's see. We've got G here, G, and we get up to A over here. And continuing to look through, here's another A, A. So we've got C below and A above, which means, again, think for a second about what you remember about the modes and see if you can figure out before I tell you what mode it's actually in. And pause, and okay. It is hypophrygian, right? Because the final is in kind of the middle of the range. We got some notes below and we got some notes above. But it's kind of weird because if you remember, or you can go back and check, hypophrygian, mode 4, goes from B below E to the B above E. It has a full octave range, and we never actually get that here, right? We kind of approach the edges, but we don't actually ever fill out the whole space. So that's already kind of one way in which this mode doesn't fit very well into the new theory. Another way has to do with the startings and endings of the different phrases, and you can kind of see the divisions by these little marks here, these kinds of marks. You can see some of them are bigger and small, some of them are smaller, and they tell us basically sections. So the first phrase starts on D and ends here and ends on D. Next phrase starts on F and then ends on G. Next phrase starts on G, ends on E. Okay, that's one that ends on the final. That's good. That's one that that's how finals usually work, is they're the last note. Okay, next phrase starts on F, ends on F, starts on F, ends on F, starts on F, ends on F. Okay, and then here now we've got one that starts on C, ends on C, starts on E. Okay, that's good. Another sort of starting on the final, but ends on G. And then last phrase, not quite last, starts on G, ends on G, starts on G, and there's our final E. So, you can count it up, but there were many starts and endings, right? And I think we only found a couple of times that the phrase either started or ended on E. And that's bizarre, right? Usually you stick with the final as kind of your anchoring place. And then the last really sort of quirky thing is that, you noticed in that middle stretch, this piece tends to spend most of its time on F, right? The way chants often work is you start on the final, you end on the final, but in between you're spending most of your time on the reciting tone. But F isn't the reciting tone in any of the modes that we talked about, right? So for all sorts of reasons having to do with the range, the notes that you begin and end ideas on, and the note that you spend most of the time on, this doesn't really fit well into the new theory, which probably means that this chant is pretty old. Now, if we look at another one, this is a Kyrie, another kind of music that you're going to be learning about in Chapter 3. If we look at this guy definitely is using the ideas in the theory that we've talked about in these videos. First off, if we look at the range, well, actually, let's find the final first. So the final is going to be D. And that tells us that it's going to be, pause for you guys to guess. Yes, you're correct. You got it. It's Dorian. And then we want to figure out, is it mode 1 or mode 2? Is it authentic Dorian, plagal Dorian, or hypodorian, right? And the way we look is we look at the range. And so let's see what the highest notes, so in this and lowest notes are. And here we have a D, we have a C here, which is not weird. But look over here, we actually get all the way down to an A, right? And so that's making me think mode 2, right? Hypodorian. And if we look at the highest note in this stretch is also an A. But then look over here. Here, okay, we're getting above the A. And you can actually, just by the way, see this little stretch here where we've got, this is our rhyming rule. We've got 2 la's and in between a fa, and it's lowered. You can see the flat there. But anyway, back to looking at the range. We've got an A, and then we've got a B, and then do we get any higher than that? Oh yeah, down here we get all the way up to the high D. So this has got sort of aspects of both plagal and authentic modes, and this is called modus commixus, or commixed mode, right? It's kind of plagal and authentic. Now let's get into kind of the nitty gritty and look at how the phrases work and see what that shows us. So the first phrase starts on the final here, goes up to the reciting tone here, finds its way back down to the final. And then, sort of sticks around the final here with the subtonium modi, that's the C here, and then ends again by descending to the final. Okay, next one starts on the very bottom of the plagal range, that lowest possible A, and then comes back up, finishes on the final, and then what we actually see here, this little stretch, is actually this stretch repeated, a kind of musical rhyme. And then if you compare these two, they're actually the same, right? So this first little stretch of Kyrie eleison repeated 3 times has a kind of ABA sort of thing. There's a little bit of a musical rhyme with this stretch, and this stretch. And the A section does the final and the reciting tone, and the B section explores the bottom part of the mode. Now let's go into the next stretch, starting over here. We start on the reciting tone. And spends most of its time around the reciting tone, starts and ends on the reciting tone. And then we get which you might notice, this whole stretch might sound familiar because it's actually kind of a variation of this. If you start here, well, actually, kind of here and here. This is getting insane looking, so I'm going to erase some stuff. And let's get back at it, because now you'll notice that this stretch is the same as this. So we've had a kind of A, B, A section. And then what we have here is sort of C, B, B prime, we'll call it C section. Okay, now into the last stretch where we sang Kyrie eleison 3 times, then we did Christe eleison 3 times. Now we're going to do Kyrie eleison 3 times. So Kyrie eleison starts here, starts on the reciting tone, and now we get to the very top of the range, which makes sense. This is kind of the musical climax, the high point. So there's our la, or fa between 2 laws again. So sticks around the reciting tone, goes up to the highest point, ends on the reciting tone. And then this, you're going to see, well, it's familiar. That's this. And then in the last stretch, this is this. Just like a little bit of a variant. And then it's so nice, they kind of do it twice. And then we end with this stretch again. So what you have in this chant is the different sections outlining the most important notes, right? The final and the reciting tone, and then at important moments exploring the different ranges, right? Going to the very bottom of the plagal version of the mode, and then at the climax going to the very top of the authentic version of the mode. So not only does it fit the mode, but it's using aspects of church theory to kind of like have meaning, right? To help make the piece more effective and coherent and exciting. It didn't just, so all this church theory that we're talking about didn't just organize and classify existing oral tradition music. It changed how composers composed. Now, the reason they needed all this organization was because there was all sorts of new music. People were composing things like crazy, and the church services were getting more and more varied, and so that's what we'll talk about next week. But now for the assignment. So for the assignment, I basically want you to answer 4 questions and submit this on Canvas. Number 1, and I'm gonna say them, but I will also write them down here. Okay. So number 1. Make this a little bigger. So in the image that I showed of Musica, how did the spirit of Musica show her disapproval of Musica Instrumentalis? Okay, that's number 1. If you need to read it again, pause, because I'm now going to say and write out number 2. Come on, eraser. Okay, number 2. Whoops. Man, I've been at this for a while. What is Evoeve? Okay, and now number 3. What are the notes reciting tone, and final of Hypolydian. And then the last question is, what note is fa in the hard hexachord, in the soft hexachord, and the natural hexachord? And you can, let me know which note in which hexachord. So you'd say, in the natural hexachord, fa is blank. In the hard hexachord, fa is blank. So answer those 4 questions. If you get all 4 right, you get some extra credit. And then finally, if you sat through all of these videos, that's not what I want. If you sat through all of these videos, you are going to be rewarded with a picture of my cat. How do we? Okay, there we go. Oh, she woke up. Hi, sweetheart. All right, have a good weekend.